a hurricane to flood your budget. Sometimes all it takes is one missing detail. Let's talk about flood insurance and how to keep your home and your wallet above water. In this video, I'll explain what flood insurance actually covers, what changed after Hurricane Ian, and why it is so important to understand your risk before you write an offer. And stick around until the end. I'll show you how to tell whether a home's flood risk could cost you hundreds more each year. By the way, if you're new here, welcome to the channel. I'm Liza with Schooner Bay Realty, and this is Discover Southwest Florida with Liza. I make weekly videos about Cape Coral, Fort Myers, and beyond, exploring neighborhoods, lifestyle, and real estate. If you're thinking about making a move down here, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. So let's start with the basics. What does flood insurance actually cover? It's different from your regular homeowner's policy, which usually covers things like wind, damage, fire, or leaks. Flood insurance covers damage caused by rising water, whether it's from heavy rain, storm surge, or an overflowing canal. If water comes from the ground up, that's when flood insurance comes into play. Here in Cape Coral and Fort Myers, that is an important distinction because we're surrounded by water. The Gulf, canals, lakes, wetlands, so even a few inches of flooding can cause major damage. Now, if you ever looked at a property's flood zone, you've probably seen letters like X, AE, or BE. They show how likely an area is to flood and how high the water could rise in a major storm. Zone X is the lowest risk area. It's considered outside the 100-year floodplain. And most lenders don't require flood insurance there. You can still get policy, but it's usually optional and cheaper. Zone AE, on the other hand, means moderate to high flood risk. That's part of what FEMA calls the special flood hazard area. And if you're getting a mortgage, your lender will require flood insurance. The letter A means it's in a high risk area. And the E comes from elevation, meaning FEMA has determined the base flood elevation for that zone. That elevation number, which you'll see on your property's elevation certificate, shows how high the water is expected to rise during a major flood. If your home sits below that level, insurance costs will go up. If it's built above it, you'll usually pay less. And then there is Zone VE, the highest risk coastal zone. The V stands for velocity. These are oceanfront or Gulf-facing areas where wave impact is a factor, so rates are typically much higher. After Hurricane Ian, we saw that flooding doesn't always stay inside those lines. Homes outside of high-risk zones were suddenly underwater, so FEMA began updating maps and pricing using its new risk rating 2.0. That update looks not only at your zone, but also factors in like distance to water, elevation, and rebuilding costs. So two houses on the same street can have a very different premium. That's why verifying the flood zone early on is so important. It helps you know right away whether you'll need a policy and how that might affect your total monthly payment. One of the most common questions I get is whether Gulf access homes are automatically more expensive to insure than, for example, a home on a freshwater canal. And the answer is yes, usually, but not always. Gulf-facing properties sit closer to open water and often sit at slightly lower elevations, which rises the risk of flooding, and usually the insurance cost. Freshwater canal homes, on the other hand, tend to be a bit higher and are less affected by storm surge, so they often fall into lower cost zones. But it's not a one-size-fits-all. It really comes down to the home's exact elevation, construction, and flood zone. That's why checking flood zones so early on and getting a professional quote is so important before you fall in love with the view. The good news, you can check a property's flood zone yourself in just a few simple steps. Here's how. For checking a property's flood risk, you have two options. You can either go to capecoral.gov under Services, Flood Information. You go to Flood Risk Information Portal and you start the dashboard. This is super easy. You could just paste your address and then you'll see what flood risk you have on that specific property. The Zone X or the Zone X500 is not in a flood zone, so you don't need flood insurance. I don't like this website. You can also go to FEMA.gov. Under flood maps, you can go flood data viewer. And I usually choose this NFHL viewer. think that's super easy to see. And also, if you don't have a specific address, that's fine too. Just gonna make it faster like this. So you see here's the house, and this is again not in the flood zone, obviously the same property. But with this viewer, I kind of like it because you can zoom out a little bit and you can move around the neighborhood and see what other flood zones there are. For example, here you have zone AE at elevation 10. So your house has to be built at an elevation level above 10 feet. Here it is 11. Obviously, it's closer to the river. And then here it's less. It's elevation 8, since it's a little further inland. And that's how you check your flood zone. If you want to go a step further, ask your agent and he can request an elevation certificate. It shows the home's base flood elevation and helps confirm how high the property sits compared to potential flood levels. Homes that are elevated above the base flood level usually cost a lot less to insure. So here are the key takeaways. Flood insurance isn't something to be afraid of, but something you'll want to understand up front. When I work with buyers, I always help verify the property's flood zone early and connect them with trusted local insurance partners for a quick quote before we even write an offer. That way you know exactly what to expect and can avoid last-minute surprises during underwriting. So now you know what flood insurance actually covers, how to check your property's flood zone yourself, and how recent changes, especially after Hurricane Ian, affect homes in Cape Coral and Fort Myers. If you're thinking about buying and want help checking a home's flood zone or understand what it might cost to insure, just reach out. I'll connect you to the right people and make sure you're fully informed. If you enjoy this video, give it a like and subscribe. I post new videos every week about life and real estate here in Southwest Florida. If you're thinking about moving down here, my free relocation guide and contact links are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.